Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be drawing support and resistance lines. So this is going to be a fairly quick tutorial, but I'm going to show you my updated method on drawing SNR lines. I am going to include a few tips and tricks and then an indicator that I actually like to use these days just to quickly plot those lines in. So, the five main steps we're going to look at today are areas of interest on our chart, including multiple wicks, which you may have heard me talk about if you're not new to my channel, validating lines using a step-by-step backtesting method, multi-time frames, specifically, drawing SNR lines on multi-time frames. I might talk a little bit about zones as well, but I'll try to keep zones to its own separate video. And then the indicator, of course. So it's a trading view indicator that I'm going to show you that I have found really helpful. So we will just get right into this stuff. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is actually multiple time frames. I know that was a little bit lower on the list, but we're going to do things a little bit out of order because I would start with looking at multiple time frames using a top-down approach. Top-down approach, for those who aren't aware of it, just means that we're starting on the higher time frames and zooming out, like I'm doing here now, to get the big picture kind of look and a zoomed out look at the market as a whole. And this just helps us to include multiple areas and get a full picture of what price action has occurred previously. So when I'm using a top-down approach, I do normally start with monthly and weekly, but I don't draw those lines in. I will sometimes draw weekly zones, but in terms of SNR lines, I don't draw them. You can, especially when you're practicing, but that's not where I start. I'll start with the daily. And that's because I'm usually intraday trading. So just keep in mind that if you're long-term swing trading or position trading, you might want to use higher time frames. But for my particular style, I don't. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today, of course, is just my personal experience and how I do this. So I start on the daily time frame. By the way, I'm using Pepperstone, the Pepperstone chart on TradingView. I don't normally use that. The reason I'm using it is actually because all my other charts are marked up, and I don't want to share a bunch of uh, like drawings and stuff on my charts because I'd have to go back and delete a bunch of notes, and I just don't really want to do that. So that's why I have chosen that, if you're wondering, because I know it's not a common one. Okay, so I'm going to start on the daily time frame, and then I'm going to work down to the 4 hour. And just for your reference, I use the daily and the 4 hour, but mostly 4 hours. Support and resistance lines. And then I use them to draw my zones. So I'm not going to draw zones today because I'm going to keep that to a separate video, but that is the process. And that's really all I wanted to talk about in terms of top-down analysis, but you'll see me actively do that as we get into it. So the next thing I'm going to look at is areas of interest, right? And I am going to take my rectangle tool at this point. Usually I have it in my toolbar, but I'm actually using a different trading view today. So what I'm going to do is I'm zoomed out, right? And I'm going to look for areas of interest. And all that means is that I'm looking at areas that have been tested multiple times. This is going to look rough, so don't judge the lines yet. Hopefully you don't judge them at all, but don't judge them yet. So what I'm going to do is roughly draw in those areas that I'm seeing just very quickly. Okay. So at this point, we're not looking to be super specific. We're not looking to draw them perfectly or anything like that. We're just looking for areas we've seen price touch again and again. So here I can see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different wick touches there. I can see obviously this area has been tested. If we look around this area, you can see, and really what you're going to notice for those of you who are possibly new to technical analysis and trading is that you're going to see multiple candlesticks rejecting an area. And by rejecting, it just means they're trying to touch it. It's not breaking through that area. And so they move away, right? That's what we mean by rejection. You'll hear me talk about that a lot. And so all of those areas where you're seeing those multiple wick touches are areas of interest. That's what I call them. Don't remember where I picked that word up. I've just always called it that. But yeah, that's how I do that. And then again, up here, and you want to look, at multiple areas across too, not just one little cluster. Of course, we can use that, but then I'm going to use, this area as well because I can see there's a wick touch here, a couple here, and it moves over to this area. And this is just something you do have to get used to. And one thing I also want to add here is that it's, and this is personal opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, but price is never going to respect a line, right? Like one line, it's never going to respect one line. You're never going to get it perfect. So of course, the point of this video is to show you how to accurately or more accurately draw your SNR lines. But just keep in mind that if you are going to use zones, you don't need to be perfect with your lines, okay? And even if you're choosing to use lines alone, it's not an exact science. It is more of an art. It's not, you're not going to get a line that price respects perfectly again and again, right? It's usually an area. So don't stress yourself out too much with it. So moving on from that, now that you've identified areas of interest, right? Which again, just areas where price has touched multiple times. We're going to look for multiple wick touches. And again, you can draw this. I would start on the daily and then I would move to the 4 hour and I would draw them in again. So if I'm switching between time frames, what I will do is I'll change the color of the lines or zones. So I'll stay on the 4 hour now because that's really where I draw most of my support and resistance. Why I draw the daily, so I'll usually draw them in, make them a different color, and I will convert them to zones, which again, we'll do in a different video. But the reason I draw them is because daily zones and support and resistance areas are generally, you'll see major reversals happen at them more often. So I like to know where they are, but day to day, I do use 4 hour. So we'll draw the rest on the 4 hour. So now that we have these lines, okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to get rid of a few of these. As a general rule of thumb, I usually draw 2 above and 2 below price. I believe I learned that from my first ever mentor. I'm going to tag her in this video just in case I mention something that she taught me. I like to give her credit. It certainly do. And I'm sure some of this I have learned from her. I've learned from all over. I've learned from personal experience. I've learned from, I've had a couple different mentors and teachers and stuff like that. So I will tag her below. I do. So yeah, usually 2 above current price. So wherever price is currently, and then 2 below. If not, I just find personally the chart gets too messy. Again, that's really personal preference. So you can do that however you want. These are all just my methods, what I find works for me. And that's that. So I'm going to draw these lines in again, but this time we're going to look at multiple wick touches. So this is how I get my support and resistance areas more accurate. And again, this is just my method, right? So what I will do is, so this would be an area of interest, right? Why? Because we're seeing price has tried to touch it multiple times. So this would be a support. So when you think support, think floor. So price is coming down and it can't break that floor, right? And when you think of resistance, so this is another area of interest because we can see price has tested it multiple times, can't break through. It can't break through the ceiling. So think resistance and ceiling. You've probably heard that before, but I'll just kind of reiterate that for any beginners that we have. And guys, really, like, the name of each one doesn't matter a whole lot. What matters is that, like it's going to be a level that you use, right? To draw zones or use as structure. So now that we have those areas, the next thing we're going to do is drag the line, the horizontal line, until it's through as many wicks as you can get it through. So I'm going to zoom out and see how far. No. Okay. So we're just going to use this area. The reason I zoomed out is to see if we had another recent wick touch over this way. Then I would obviously try to incorporate those wicks as well, but we don't. And we don't to the right either. So what I will do is just use the few wicks I have here. So what I mean by including as many wicks as possible is that, let me try to get my little pen and hope that I don't mess anything up here. Okay. So what I mean by that is we have 1, 2, 3 wick touches there, right? And 4. Okay. Now, if we were to drag this down a little bit or up a little bit, okay? So let's say we dragged it up and we want to include these 2 here. Well, now it's going to include 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to include this actually. Okay, so in this case, this is actually a really good this is a really good example, because if we drag it up a little bit more, I'm going to show you something here. Okay, if we drag it to this area here, we can see now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 wick touches now. All right. However, what I will say is often you'll have 2 support lines very, very close to each other, which is again why it's always better to use a zone, right? Because then you can include both. It's not uncommon to have 2 support lines or support and resistance lines, very, very close. So I wouldn't necessarily leave this line out. I think this is definitely still a support. It's just that it's very close. And then additionally, I can see this area here, right? We can also get okay, not quite 4, but 2 wick touches here. So this is going to be another area as well. So I know it's a lot of lines, but if you went to the lower time frame, you could technically get entry off of those. But we'll leave this one in for now because this is the most. This has the most wick touches to it, and that's all it is. So let's do it again up here. So what we've plotted our area of interest, right? We can see that this is an area price is trying to touch. When you're plotting your area of interest, don't be too picky with it. You just want to get it plotted in, and then we're going to move it. So now we're going to take the line. We can see that this line here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 wick touches, okay? And if we drag it down to, I'm trying to get these 2 here. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7. We could pretty much call that 7. That's quite close. And if we drag it up, we would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're going to get 7 either way. But again, these are 2 different areas, really, if I'm really getting picky. So you could actually draw both of those in. But I wouldn't drag it to, say, this area here, because then I'm only going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If I moved it down just a little bit, I only have 4. So I would move it up. That is just how I do it. Again, there are certainly more methods out there, but this is what I've found the easiest and the most reliable. So now I'm going to talk about validating your lines. You're going to hear me talk about validating quite a bit, specifically in more detail when it comes to zones. I know I said about using a backtesting method to do this. I actually changed my mind. I'm going to do that in a separate video because this is already getting long. I try to keep these short so you can consume them easily. And I think if I keep talking and especially getting into backtesting, it's going to get too long. So I'm going to show you quickly, though, how I would validate the line. So we'll start with the bottom. Okay. So we have our area drawn in. It's easier to go to the higher time frame. I can tell you that right now, just in terms of zooming out. And we want to make sure that we have at least 3 areas where this has been respected in the past. So here we have this one here. We have this area here. And again, respecting means that it tried to break, but it couldn't. So this is the daily time frame. So that is quite obviously being respected here. And then of course it's breaking at other points too. That's fine though, as long as we can find areas that's been respected. And let's just keep zooming out. Okay, so we can see multiple areas here. So on this one especially, let me grab my tools so that I'm not breezing through this. Again, I want to try to accommodate people who are beginners. We can see it's been respected because here it's acting as a floor, right? It's not quite breaking through. We've got a little bit of slippage below those areas where the wick is coming down. Again, when we draw zones, that's going to like mitigate the losses you would experience from that, or help us create better entry, I guess I should say, in terms of, again, using lines, because a line's never going to be perfectly respected, right? And then I can tell you now that this line here is not as great of a level, and that's just going to happen. You're going to draw zones that are respected really nicely as support and resistance, and others that aren't. But as long as you can find three, so clearly this line here, we can find three quite easily, right? And I can see multiple areas, at least three, where this was respected. Like here again, this is the daily, right? So you're not going to see as much price action, as much noise, I guess I should say. But it does come down. It retests this one level perfectly here, and you will notice. Okay, here this is being beautifully respected as support. Resistance areas will become support, and support will become resistance. That's very common. So this originally, when we drew it, we're looking back at the past now, but originally when we drew it in present day or close to it, it's acting as a resistance. Here, it's acting as a support. So that's how you validate. You just go back and look for 3 wick touches. The other thing I guess I should add is that it is better if you have more recent wick touches. So we're going back all the way to 2018, 2019 now. It is the daily time frame, so that does make it a little bit better, but it would be better, and it's nicer if you have more recent validation, meaning you go back and you can find 3 recent wick touches within the last year. So that would just make it an even better area of interest. You can still certainly use lines that you haven't found much recent interaction with. The other thing I'll say too is, like, if you're trading something that's making an all-time high, you're not going to be able to do this. Example would be, US 30. I know it's not making new highs right now, certainly not, but I know last year when we were trading it, you're often seeing these new highs, right? Bitcoin, same song and dance. You're not going to see new highs right now, but it wasn't uncommon throughout the last 2 years to see all-time highs. So in that case, you'd really be entering based on momentum, which again, we won't get into that. That's going to be a different video. Last thing I want to show you before I make this way too chatty and long, is this indicator. So it's by Lux Algo, and it's called support and resistance levels with breaks. So we're going to click that. It is really, really great. So I really like this indicator. It tends to line up very well. You can see it actually lining up with the lines I've drawn. Of course, it's never going to be perfect, right? But it very much will line up with the way I draw my zones. So I'm not sure exactly how the code is drawn. I have read through it, but I've read through a lot of these this year. But you can certainly read through it. I'll link it below, so you can go to the information page. But I find it's very good. So if you're new to drawing support and resistance and you want to get a second look at it, or you just want to use it, you can back test them yourself. It's a really, really good indicator. So maybe that will make this whole video pointless for some of you if you're just going to use this, but it's good to know how to draw it anyway. You don't ever want to rely on an indicator. I just thought it was a really great one and I wanted to show you. And then in the next video, when I draw zones based on support and resistance levels, which isn't my favorite way to draw zones, but it's a really good starting point. It's definitely the easiest way to draw zones. I'll show you how to do it using these lines. So that's just a little quick tip for you. And that's it for this video, guys. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below, and I'll see you in my next tutorial.